British MPs are one step closer to stopping Prime Minister Boris Johnson from seeking a no-deal Brexit.
Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Just last hour, opposition lawmakers and even some Conservative MPs voted to take control of Parliament. That means tomorrow they will try to pass a law that would delay Brexit until January. Johnson says if that happens, he will push for a snap election. Johnson wants Britain to leave the EU on October 31st with or without a deal. His opponents believe a no-deal exit would have dire consequences.
I don't want an election, but if MPs vote tomorrow to stop negotiations and to compel another pointless delay to Brexit, potentially for years, then that would be the only way to resolve this. And I can confirm that we are tonight tabling a motion under the Fixed Term Parliament Act.
There is no consent in this House to leave the European Union without a deal. There is no majority for no deal in the country. As I've said before, if the Prime Minister has the confidence in his Brexit policy, when he has one he can put forward, he should put it before the people in a public vote.
Christophe Bondy is ready to join us from London. Of course, he's former senior counsel to Canada on CETA and has helped us go through a lot of this Brexit over the past months and years. He's an investment lawyer at Cooley LLP. Hi, Mr. Bondy. Great to see you again.
Hi, how are you?
Clearly, not a calm debate there, Mr. Bondy. Understandably so, given the stakes.
Yes, so I think you can see to what point the British Parliament, but a reflection of, I think, arguably the British people have become polarized around this issue. And I think what's interesting about Jeremy Corbyn's comment right there is that he's not going to be drawn into the trap of an election. The Prime Minister doesn't have the power, given the Fixed Term Act, to simply declare an election will be held. He needs 2/3 of the support of the Commons to move up the date of the election. And it sounds from that comment like he's not going to get Labour support, precisely because Labour and this cross-party group of MPs want to make sure that the bill that prevents the government from crashing out with a no deal is passed without a deal, is passed before any election is held. You know, what you see here is Boris Johnson, again, trying to set up this kind of blame game that Parliament is preventing him from reaching a deal, or the EU is preventing him from reaching a deal, when he doesn't have the slightest clue about the content of whatever deal that he would present to the EU. The EU diplomats have said he hasn't presented any substantive proposals. So the notion that he is being prevented by Parliament from achieving a deal he would otherwise reach by the end of October is complete rubbish, as they'd say here. And the question is, now that assuming that this bill gets passed and there is an extension, he will be held to actually trying to negotiate something. He'll probably play dog in the manger and play this kind of terrible populist politics of seeking to blame Parliament, seeking to blame the EU again of why he's now unable to negotiate. But I think all of this is about Boris Johnson actually being held to do something substantive, which is something he's probably rarely done in his life. And query where this is going to lead. It's certainly been the most dispiriting prime ministership in British history.
What is behind Boris Johnson's motivation to be able to use the possibility of a no-deal Brexit as leverage?
Using no deal, he says, well, we have to show resolve to the EU in order to get what we want. We just want to get rid of the so-called Irish backstop. I think that's complete rubbish. The EU hasn't changed their position one bit. Michel Barnier, the chief EU negotiator this past weekend, repeated that we're still going to have the issue of dealing with the Irish border, keeping the Irish border open. respecting the Good Friday Agreement. So all of this bullish talk about we're going to leave, it's kind of like, again, saying, well, if you don't get me what I want, I'm going to drive myself off the cliff, or I'm going to go ramming my head against the wall. You know, what do you say? Knock yourself out. But most of the British people, I would say a majority of the British people, when asked, don't want that to happen. So I think that there's some real sense to the discussion, to the characterization of what's happening as a coup. You know, Brexit has always been a plan, or the extreme form of Brexit has certainly been the plan of a minority of the population. It's not what was sold to people during the referendum. The people who are in Boris Johnson's cabinet are all made up of the kind of Brexit Ayatollahs at this point, and they keep harping on about the will of the people, going back to a referendum that was held 3 years ago and that was advisory and that was supposed to be interpreted by Parliament. So, you know, the thing is, right now, Boris Johnson keeps trying to make this the EU's problem, and the EU keeps looking back to Boris Johnson and saying, okay, you don't like the backstop. What is it? What is your proposal? And he's got nothing in the bag. So his whole rhetoric to Parliament is, you need to give me more time. You need to give me more opportunity to negotiate. And even this morning with Tory MPs at number 10, they said, well, what? Negotiate. What is your proposal? Nothing to provide. But this is typical of Boris Johnson, who's a person who's, you know, made most of his career on the basis of bluffing his way through and not doing any of the hard work and frankly lying about things. You know, if you went back to the history of fake news, Boris Johnson's lies about the EU to the UK would probably be chapter 1.
What is the impact of all of that on people in the UK right now? I mean, I feel like we've talked to you 50 times in the last 2 years, and the uncertainty that this has created has been one thing to deal with, but now it's almost at a next level. What is the mood like among people in the UK?
I think at one level, people are incredibly weary of all this. At the other level, I think, you know, it's still an open question whether or not there is going to be an election, whether or not they'll fall into this so-called elephant trap that Boris Johnson is trying to set tomorrow. But an election will come sooner or later. And I think what this Brexit debate has really done is led to an incredible polarization of the society, a distrust of institutions. I think that's what the election to come is going to be one of the hardest fought in anyone's memory, where the election is going to be fought on a riding by riding basis with very strong calculations about who are the candidates, how are they are expected to deal with this particular issue. Of how we're going to approach Brexit. Or are we going to have a Brexit at all? Are we going to have another referendum, which a sizable member of the Parliament would agree with? So I think on the one hand, everyone is sick of it. Everyone would like it to go away. On the other hand, I think it's one of those situations where it's going to get worse before it's going to get better. And I think it's one of the situations where citizens need to be engaged and need to think about what are the real facts, not imperial fantasies or you know, fantasies of going it alone or global Britain or whatever the hell, you know, the language they've used, but you know, what does the economy of this country actually depend upon? How is its political influence in the rest of the world best played out? And you know, I think most right-thinking observers would agree that it's been through leadership through the European Union. Of course, there are going to be people who disagree with that, but I think that is the fight that's going to have to be had here, and it's going to be a hand-to-hand fight.
Mr. Bondi, I really appreciate all your insight this evening. That's Christoph Bondi of Cooley LLP for us in London. Thank you. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.